I think the thing to remember to avoid becoming overwhelmed by a large project is to remember you can tackle it in pieces. And when you do that, it's actually a way to succeed quickly for the first section and not feel like it's too much work all at once. My name is Shelley Lambert, and I'm not only a director of Forêt Capitale Forest and chief food forester of Nanabush Food Forest. I'm also a software developer, and I help run a very large open source software project. At the Just Food Community Farm, that's where this is situated. It's a small little plot here. There's a lot of other partners doing wonderful things at the farm. You do hear the term permaculture a lot, and what that really is a conjunction of two words, permanent agriculture. And really what that means to me is you're permanently establishing a site that's going to grow food. And why would you do it permanently? You don't want to till the soil. You don't want to disturb all the creatures that live in that soil that help those things that you've planted grow and thrive. So the 2 billion little creatures that live in a teaspoon of healthy forest floor, those creatures don't like that you till them up and destroy their habitat. They actually work better when you keep the soil mulched, so it's cool and moist. They have a certain criteria for being healthy, and that includes the mycelial network that grows under the forest floor and works with a lot of different trees and shrubs and plants to be able to provide water, nutrients, and information. So we know that trees actually talk to each other through this mycelial network under the ground, and we actually know they exchange nutrients and give and take from each other when they need it. So we do not want to disturb that if we can avoid. The care and maintenance of the stuff we plant and care for, both Forêt Capitale Forest and Nanabush, is actually designed to be a joy. It's designed to be a relationship between you and nature and saying, what can I offer to you because you offer so much to me? And the other good thing about creating a space that is permanent and not a bunch of annual vegetables is that you plant it once and then your work level decreases. You don't have to plant everything again in the spring. What you're doing there is observing. You're checking for disease, you're looking to see if anything needs pruning, you're looking at the weather forecast to see, is it going to be a dry, hot, heat wave summer here? What do we need to do to make sure these trees have the best experience through that climate? We have created and curated this space to feel like a woodland ecosystem and then inserted edible food-bearing trees and shrubs and perennial vegetables and edible mushrooms here. The space itself has a series of walking paths, and it has very few straight lines because it's actually meant to be experiential. It's meant to have people wander and discover at every turn. Some of the changes we made at this site, because the water table's really high and we don't want, a lot of trees really don't want their feet wet, we have to raise up the level of the soil. We decided to go with using hugelkultur method or mounds, which is essentially building a very large, a very slow burning compost pile with logs and branches and a lot of weeds and debris that you find. You pile that all up, you cover it with soil, and you plant into it. And it has a number of functions, wonderful, beneficial functions. One of them being those logs at the bottom of the pile act like a water sponge, and they release water to the roots of the things that are growing in that mound, which means less irrigation needed. Because they're slowly decomposing, they're in the first year not so much providing nutrients, but after year one, providing a load of nutrients and also generating some heat. So you get a little microclimate off of them as well. And the extra value of changing the contour of the land that you're growing on is you get more surface area. So if I have a big, flat, 10 square foot property, tiny little thing, and I plant into it, I know that I have 10 by 10 surface area to grow in. But if I fold it, I have actually more surface area to grow in. And if I fold it twice, even more. So we start to find new land to plant in by changing the contour. I love the question about what should I do to make sure when I'm planting a potted tree, ensure that it'll survive and thrive. Because there are some things that people commonly do that aren't quite right that we want to teach. So the very first thing is to check where the root flare is of the tree that's in the pot. You can dig down along the trunk and feel for where the first root starts. That's the beginning of the root flare. And you might see that in that pot, it's buried 2 inches under the soil line. And that's not what you're going to do when you put it in the ground. You're going to pull that extra 2 inches away so that the level of the root flare is level with the soil that you plant. Which means when you're digging your hole, you're going to measure how much of a depth you need to make sure that that root flare is level with the soil. The other thing we like is to make sure that that root ball is sitting on undisturbed natural soil. So if you can manage to measure first and not dig down and then have to amend under it, that's better, because sometimes if you amend under it with compost, that compresses and then your tree sinks, which we also want to avoid. So typically people plant a deep hole and narrow. That's not really great. You want to go wider, 2 times wider than the diameter of the pot, because tree roots want to grow outward. And a lot of the tree roots, I think over 90% of the tree roots are in the first foot of soil. You might have a deep taproot coming down for certain kinds of species, but a lot of this action happens in that first foot of soil. So a wide, not too deep of a hole, just the right depth of hole. And then when we're amending that soil that's going into the hole you've dug, we only want to bring in no more than 30% of amendments into it. You want that natural soil and use that soil, because otherwise you might be creating a teacup effect where the roots will get to the edge of that hole. It's in lush, beautiful soil that you put. They hit clay and it goes, I'm not gonna try to go into that clay. And that stunts the growth of the tree. So once you get that tree planted, it's level, you've done a great job of that, you're gonna mulch heavily. You might even put a very thin layer of compost at the surface before you put natural wood chips around that tree. And you're not gonna bring soil or wood chips mulch up to the trunk of the tree, you're gonna leave a little ring. So it's gonna look like a donut. And then the final step, once you've done all that work to plant this beautiful tree, water it well in that first day that you've planted it. Really give it a good soaking. And then for the next week or 2, make sure that it's tended so that it can start to establish its roots. Getting yourself into that mindset of trial and error and enjoying the process of being able to grow things and learn from it, that's kind of the human process. That's the fun of being alive, right? So don't be afraid to fail and get your shovel in the ground.